Now this might just seem like an ordinary view of the ocean. But actually, this is a farm. An ocean farm. Just below the water, thousands of shellfish and acres upon acres of seaweed are growing. Of course, people are eating oysters or clams or mussels, but what about all of that green slimy stuff? Seaweed is used in more than just sushi. In fact, in America, using seaweed as food dates back to before the beginning of the nation, when pilgrims met with Native Americans and, for example, were taught about their cuisine, like clam bakes. Yes, a traditional clam bake included cooking up kelp aside all that shellfish. But since then, seaweed has transformed over and over again. You can find seaweed in more than just your dinner plate at your favorite Asian restaurant.
You know, they think, oh, it's not really food. It's kind of that slimy stuff on the beach. And, you know, people were really, really, really clear about this. Well, I wouldn't eat that. What, put that in my mouth? So imagine their surprise when I said, but you already do every day.
Seaweed could be in your toothpaste, in your almond milk, in your pricey moisturizer, or baby food, ice cream, and even your beer. Seaweed is used in medicines, and it can be used for fuel.
I think an algae-based fuel should be able to power all planes in the world.
All of this to say, the global demand for seaweed is expanding. The commercial seaweed market could surpass $85 billion before 2026. As for what it takes to farm seaweed, all you need is $20,000, 20 acres of water, and a boat. A single seaweed farm can net up to $90,000 to $120,000 a year.
There's no fresh water, no fertilizer, no feed. Make it the most sustainable food on the planet, but at the same time, our crops soak up carbon, nitrogen, rebuild reef systems, so they really become engines of restoration as we're farming and trying to make a living.
Here's what makes up the seaweed industry. Algae, kelp, seaweed. There's an estimated 10,000 different kinds of it.
It's kind of a plant, but it's not a land plant. It's kind of the sea, but it's not a fish. If you think about it, you think, well, then if it's neither one nor the other, it's probably not edible. And that's what a lot of people that I would interview kind of said to me. They said, well, not really anything, is it?
But of course, it turns out seaweed is certainly something. In fact, seaweed is pretty essential to the life of the planet. Marine algae produces anywhere from 50% to 80% of the planet's oxygen supply. Not to mention, seaweed absorbs a huge amount of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. It's known that seaweed has been historically popular in Eastern diets. Nowadays, millions of sea vegetables are farmed in Asia every year. In 2019, the Asian Pacific held over 55% share in the commercial seaweed market because of the food industry. But going back in American history, seaweed was a big part of the Native American diet too, before Western colonization. Somewhere along the line, Americans started to shun seaweed as part of their diets.
But it's just been pushed out of the economy and off the plate.
Seaweed is a green vegetable that comes with its own salty seasoning.
Algae found other uses in American history. Seaweeds were used as gunpowder in the Revolutionary War and chemical weapons in World War I. But when it comes to modern aquaculture, the industry is based on existing market demand. And that traditionally is in seaweed. Americans want to eat fish. Fish farm production topped beef production in 2013, and Americans are eating more farmed fish than wild caught. Globally, aquaculture's total farm gate sale value, that's the value of the product itself without accounting for selling costs like transportation or marketing, reached over $263.6 billion. That number accounts for products like fish, crustaceans, marine algae, and even pearls and seashells. But most of those billions are in fishing, and seaweed farmer Bren Smith would know. He was a fisherman for most of his life.
I never expected to grow vegetables underwater.
Beautiful, huh?
Now I'm a fisherman, work the high seas, and I'm not an environmentalist in a traditional way. I'm a fisherman, I hunt and kill things, but my goal is to make a living on a living planet. I mean, there's no way I can run my farm, run my small business unless I become a steward of the oceans and grow crops that are breathing life back into it.
Smith started out in seaweed farming after years of fishing on the high seas and bearing witness to the degradation of the world's oceans due to overfishing and climate change. He turned to what he calls restorative ocean farming.
Restorative or regenerative ocean farming is growing crops that breathe life back into the ocean.
The sort of chocolate color, that's all nitrogen.
So our seaweeds and shellfish require zero inputs, no fresh water, no fertilizer, no feed.
I'm actually proud of this.
This is what one of those farms looks like. Ropes of kelp seeds are strung through the ocean's surface like garland, and hanging beside kelp seeds are netting baskets of scallops and socks of mussels to grow in. At the bottom of the structure are crates growing oysters and clams. Smith went on to found Greenwave, a nonprofit organization training people to be ocean farmers.
And our goal is 10,000 farmers in 10 years to train. And so far we've trained about 160 farmers. We have a waiting list of 6,000 just in the US and requests in 102 countries. So the demand is huge.
In comparison to likely a lot of upstarts, starting a seaweed farm could be relatively low cost.
There's a low barrier to entry. Because we grow things that don't swim away and you don't have to feed, the overhead is extremely low. It takes basically $20,000 to $50,000, depending on the area, to start a farm. You need a boat and 20 acres, and you can be up and running.
And Smith points to a profit to be made.
We see the future of farms as being sort of 4 quadrants of income. 1, we're harvesting food. 2, harvesting byproduct like bioplastics, things like that. 3rd, we're harvesting data. So we have sensors on farms throughout the country which are pulling data. We package that. What we hope to do is sell that to insurance companies, government, things like that. And that's an income stream for every farmer. And then the 4th quadrant is ecosystem services. So farmers should be paid for the carbon they soak up, the nitrogen. And so we're developing a blue carbon program. And I think that's what climate resiliency looks like in the future.
Dr. Charles Yarish of the University of Connecticut has helped tons of ocean farms get started.
We're making up what people have done on land with land crops. We're doing it in a matter of maybe less than a decade. And then with the COVID virus, we had to really work hard about getting each of the farms harvested in a COVID-safe way.
Infrastructure remains the biggest challenge to scaling these farms. For example, a processing plant costs about $1.3 million. That plant would allow a farmer to process 2 million pounds of seaweed a year.
It's that infrastructure in the middle to stabilize and process the kelp. The good thing about our model is that it's cheap to do in water. It's just ropes and buoys. The challenge is when you hit land, you face all the challenges land-based farmers face. So we need to powder it dry, flake, and that infrastructure just doesn't exist, and it's really capital intensive.
Market demand is not a challenge for the seaweed industry right now. Besides being used for food, another big use of seaweed is colloids, specifically phycocolloids, like alginate, agar, and carrageenan. If those sound like strange words you might find in a nutrition label, you're right. These are seaweed-based food additives that can produce a certain consistency or texture. Seaweed is also increasing in popularity as a meat substitute.
It enhances the meatiness. It's full of natural umami, which people use a lot now to convey the idea of meat, but without the meat.
So one of the challenges of a lot of the plant-based foods is that it's soy-based, and soy is extremely destructive. So we want to replace those harmful inputs with things like seaweed.
It was actually McDonald's that first pioneered a burger using seaweed. Back in 1991,
Introducing
the
McLean
Deluxe,
made with a 91% fat-free beef patty.
and it was advertised as the NBA's official sandwich.
New McLean Deluxe will blow you away.
It was on the menu for 5 years. Colloids are not just a food additive. They're also present in medicine. For example, alginates are used in dental mold production and in wound dressings, and even diet pills. Seaweed is also found in the personal care sector. alginates are used as dispersing and thickening agents in lotions, creams, and soaps. For example, the first ingredient in this moisturizer from La Mer is algae extract. 2 ounces of this lotion retails for $345. Colloids are also found in fabrics. Today, firemen's clothes is still treated with alginate for fireproofing. Another factor boosting the industry's valuation is demand for eco-friendly fertilizers.
Because many seaweeds also produce growth-regulating compounds. And these growth-regulating compounds are part of the biostimulants that are used in our land-based agriculture.
Hand in hand with fertilizers is animal feed.
Many animal feeds, whether they be cattle feeds, chicken feeds, hog feeds, actually have seaweed ingredients in them.
But also, some studies show it could be a way to fight climate change. So cows produce a lot of methane gas. And methane is a major greenhouse gas contributing to global warming. In 2016, Australia's James Cook University found that adding a small amount of a particular algae reduced methane production by 99%. Smith says a new climate economy is starting, and this can be seen in another use for seaweed: biofuel. That's where the Department of Energy's Mariner program comes in. The program aims to make better use of the United States underwater territory because the US actually has more water than land, known as the Exclusive Economic Zone, and it's larger than the total land area of the US, including Alaska.
If you're producing it sustainably as a biofuel, you can replace fossil fuels because it's all photosynthetic.
The US Department of Energy estimates that seaweed biofuel can yield more energy per acre than land crops like corn.
Really what's exciting about it is that you look at biomass as really a resource for a lot of energy solutions, not just for fuels, but also for power. And so there's a lot of ways to use biomass, and especially in a low carbon world.
Since the Mariner program began in 2015, it has put more than $50 million into at least 18 different farming projects. But right now, if seaweed were to be used for biofuel, it would be really expensive.
The goal of our funding is really to drive the cost down far enough that you can even consider it for energy.
And that's due to basic supply and demand. It's a pricey fuel source because of the market demand for seaweed in food, fertilizer, and animal feed, and farms are supplying for those markets. Then, whatever is extra or left over is priced for fuel or energy.
There's really the opportunity to utilize that resource and strengthen a lot of coastal communities. Basically, adding opportunities for what is called working waterfronts. So how big it can really get, I don't really want to put a number to that because that's speculation, but I think we have a big resource and we have a lot of people that are interested in this space.
I can tell you right now, whatever your preconceived notion about the industry is, probably in the next 2 or 3 years, U.S. will be going from a minor player in global production to a major player.
Seaweed use in bioplastics and in Western cooking could be part of the industry's bigger picture in coming years. Besides the economic opportunity, seaweed can be part of the solution in fighting global warming, which ultimately creates what Smith calls the blue-green economy.
Green Waves programming is really targeted at 2 constituencies. One is fishermen directly affected by climate change, and the other is indigenous communities. Right? Indigenous communities have rights to the ocean, and it's important that they're in the front of the line of this revival of ocean agriculture.
According to the World Bank, a network of farms equivalent to 5% of U.S. territorial waters can create 50 million direct jobs.
This diverse group of people that are basically taking a chance on a topic that they don't know how big it's really growing. It's not a very established career path at this point. Seeing the enthusiasm of these people and has been, I think, very rewarding.
Smith also says seaweed can be a part of the way growing populations are fed in years to come. One study found a network of farms totaling the size of Washington state could supply enough protein for every person living today. But getting all of this farming of seaweed done is part of the bigger picture too.
It's got to be responsibly farmed because we're in danger of doing to the sea what we've done to the land. So if any of us are waving a flag, it's that. Seaweed is great, but use it responsibly.
Smith started on his journey as a seaweed farmer, touting the many food possibilities, before he realized seaweed could be something much bigger than a piece of the dinner plate.
The message was kelp is the new kale, right? I coined the term kelp is the new kale, and I think I was wrong. I think it's something else. We don't totally know what it is, but the key is opening these various markets.